Good morning. Good morning. It is 2:30 a.m. My name is Jermaine Robertson. I am on my way to the gym right now, and I'm going to share with you a story about Jonah and how Jonah ended up in the belly of a huge whale. And for the longest, because I am not the most educated individual, but yet I have a very active what's the word that I'm looking for? I have a very active mind, a very creative mind. So for the longest, I thought Jonah and the whale was a story told in Moby Dick. So this is going to help somebody. And it helped me when I first heard it. And the way it was formulated made so much sense. And it was giving us an idea about how good God is and how real God is. It was also giving us a overview of what happens, and even when we're disobedient, how God's love and grace abounds even our disobedience or our sin or whatever else that we go through. It's an example of the love he has for us. Now, I may get this wrong because I'm not a theologist. I am not a Bible scholar. I am just a regular man with kids and a wife and problems just like everybody else. Done been through things just like everybody else. So I'm going to give it to you in a very simple layman's terms so that you can pick it up and understand it. Jonah was a prophet. He was a man of God. He was some type of preacher. He knew God's word. God knew that he had the ability to deliver that word. And so God called on Jonah one day to go somewhere. And when God calls on you, it's never like me yelling over to Malachi, hey, come do the dishes now. It's never that loud and clear. It says, come. So he gives Jonah, he gives him a call. But the way Jonah hears it, it doesn't agree with Jonah. Now, let me remind you, we're talking about the Middle East. We're talking about times where Christians were being crucified and there was battles and wars going on. There was death looming in a lot of areas. And one of the areas that God called Jonah to go to was one of those areas. And Jonah, knowing better, knowing that there was a calling on him to do something, but let his flesh overcome him, he opted to go another direction. God called him again. God called him. Remember, God doesn't call like I call. You know, I had my car taken to a shop. I didn't want to drive it. So I asked him to pick it up. I made a physical call. I spoke to somebody. I paid for it. They gave me a receipt. It was a transaction. No, God doesn't call for you like that. He speaks to your heart. He speaks to your spirit. You can always tell when God's calling you. Because when you go in the opposite direction of Him, you're not at peace with it. You're not at peace. So Jonah got the call. I want to say the place he was supposed to go was a place called Nineveh. Could be wrong again. I'm going to screw this story up a lot. Noah's like, bro, I'm not sure I can do that one. Do you know what's going on over there, God? I don't want to have no parts of that. But see, God knows things that we don't know. So He expects us to trust Him. I put my daughter on top of the countertop. We have these high countertops. It's a high kitchen island. I put her up there and I tell her to stand and I tell her to jump. I say, come on. I said, jump. As hard as you can, jump. And she looks at me and she jumps far. She's not worried about hitting the ground. Because I have two things going on. One, children are sometimes more open to hearing God's voice because the thing called life hasn't jaded them yet, that they're willing to be obedient and listen. It's one. Two, she knows for a fact, because of our experience, our history together, she knows I won't drop her. She knows I won't drop her. So God calls to Jonah. See, I need you to go over here, dog. They need your word here more than anywhere else. But Jonah's overcome by his flesh and the thought of possible death, and all the worst things that could possibly happen are overcoming him. Even though he has God with him, his flesh is at battle with his spirit. His spirit wants him to move in faith, trust. Like I want my daughter to jump to me and trust. But his flesh was telling him that death was right around the corner. Same way Sanaya could have said, you can drop me and I can hit the ground. That would hurt. So Jonah, instead of doing what he was instructed to do, Jonah went the opposite way and got on a boat going in the total opposite direction of where God told him to go. God was like, I need you to go over here. Jonah was like, I'm going over here, dog. You tripping, bro. Like they got drinks and they got girls over here. Like, this is what's happening. I'm not going over there. Them dudes is over there dying. That's not happening. So, sorry, I don't think that you're calling me. And since God don't make no mistakes, And God is such a merciful God. Jonah gets on the boat. Got his feet kicked up on the deck lounge. Maybe Paul playing him a little Marco Polo. He thinking, I'm not going there, and I'm going to do it my way. So, not too long after Jonah is on the high seas, and the waves are getting high, and things is happening, he ends up having an issue on the boat. And the way that the crew decided that they wanted to resolve the issue with Jonah is they said rather than kill him, they were going to just toss him over into the ocean to drown. But mind you, God still had his hand on him. He still had a calling for him. In light of Jonah's being disobedient, he still had his hand on him. He still had a calling for him. But Jonah was persistent to do it his way. So the man picked him up angrily and tossed him into the ocean. As Jonah's flying over the edge of the boat, screaming, knowing he's getting ready to meet sure death now, there happens to be a huge fish, a whale. At that very moment, in that very same location, the whale hasn't eaten for about a year. I don't know. Jonah goes over the boat, and rather than drowning, he ends up in the belly of the whale. He ends up in the belly of the whale, where he is kept alive for 3 days and spit back up on shore where he started at before the boat. Now, you can take it as just some type of folklore. I choose to put a lot of emphasis in what I read, especially if it's out of the Bible. The message that I take out of that was that even in spite of the fact of what you're not willing to do, God loves you so much that even in spite of the stupid decisions that you decide to make against what he's instructing you to do, even sometimes against what you're at peace with, if he's kept you around, if he spared you, if you woke up today, and dude, I can't emphasize this enough. Like, I just had a conversation with Malachi yesterday about making horses drink water. I can't make you understand what I'm saying, but understand that if you are still here, if you're still alive, if you done went through some things, and it hasn't killed you, I would say that you and Jonah have a lot in common, because there's a lot of people that didn't make it. But you're still here as a living testimony, in spite of your disobedience, in spite of your wanting to do it your way, in spite of going the opposite direction of where you were called, in spite of outright just disobedience, God still kept you here. You done fought and beat all types of external extenuating circumstances. You're still here. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, am I still here, and why? We focus too much on what's wrong right now, but never do we reflect back on how did we get into this position. Then we say, God, why have you left me? Why have you forsaken me? Why must I suffer? Sometimes you got to ask yourself, if not you, then who? Better yet, how about you just change places with Jesus Christ on the cross? There's got to be some sacrifice. Everybody can't sacrifice around you and then you get the reward. The majority of lottery winners lose their fortune because there was nothing, no discipline, there was no sacrifice that came with the winnings. Well, I paid $2 for the scratch-off ticket, so that's enough. No, that wasn't faith, and that wasn't paying consequences or a price. You got lucky. Or you may have got blessed, and because you didn't know the difference, you lost it anyways. If you're still here, you have a purpose. The craziest thought that came to my mind as we were driving through the car wash yesterday, I looked over at my wife and I said, man, Steve Jobs had all that money. I mean, dude could have easily had somebody knocked off in a third world country, bought all their body parts and said, hey, just piece them together with me, make me whole again, take out what's broken, put what's in new, let's make this happen. But when it's your time, it's your time. And all the money in the world, all the technology in the world, he couldn't put an apple inside of his body and make it work. He could not. I know he was sitting on his deathbed thinking, how now? You think you're cursed and you're still here. But imagine having all the money in the world, being at the pinnacle of your popularity. And then having to exit stage left. The final closing curtain call. That tells me one thing. If Steve Jobs can die and he has all the money in the world, all the technology, and he's at the pinnacle and the peak of where he was in life, that he served his purpose. If you're still here and you haven't reached that point, you still have a purpose. Your job is to find it. And if God has saved Jonah, who was a disobedient servant, who went the opposite direction of where he was commanded to go, and let him fall in the mouth of a belly of a fish for 3 days, the same way Christ was in the grave for 3 days, and to let him come back out afterwards, is a testament to the fact that God is here, one, also a testament that you have a purpose, two. And you've had pitfalls and you've had stumbles, not because you were disobedient, but because it's those pitfalls and those stumbles that ultimately build the character inside of you to be who God has called you to be.